Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at another Kid Galaxy set. I absolutely love the Kid Galaxy sets because sometimes they give you some pretty cool figures overall, and other times they give you some duds. And we can straight away see that there are a few duds in this set because instantly we can see that there are some bootlegs, as this one and this one are both JP3 bootlegs from the Hasbro Jurassic Park 3 line, and you can definitely see that they are pretty much exactly the same as far as the original releases went, but with alternate paint schemes. And that is one slight downside to the Kid Galaxy line at times, is that they do use bootlegs when it comes to mostly the JP3 line, it seems. I don't really recall them releasing any other bootlegs other than Jurassic Park 3 bootlegs. I could be wrong, I may just not be remembering that, but as far as this set goes, you can see there are quite a few figures included. In fact, we have 6 altogether, and one species that is included, although maybe not the most appealing version of said dinosaur, was one that really appealed to me because there aren't very many figures of it out there. But you can see that here on the front, as far as the box art goes, we have Dinosaur Action 6-pack. You can also see a very prehistoric volcanic-like background with, of course, our 6 dinosaur figures here standing in the front. If we flip the box around, which is a little tough to do because of the ridiculously long size of it, you can see now that they have species names as well as information about each of the species. You can see that we have a Pachycephalosaurus, a Giganotosaurus, a Protoceratops, which is horribly inaccurate, which actually every one of the figures that you're going to find in here are probably pretty horribly inaccurate because you don't really get much accuracy as far as Kid Galaxy sets go. Here is the one that I was really interested in getting my hands on, which is the Ichthyovinator, because I don't have... Well, actually, I have one. I think I have Collect Days version. I don't know that there are any others released currently as far as that species go, and if there are, I can't recall off the top of my head. But I know there aren't many, and that's one reason why I really wanted this set. And then we also have the Deinonychus, which is actually the JP3 Velociraptor, and then the Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is also a JP3 knockoff. But as far as the set goes, it looks pretty fun, so let's go ahead, break each of the dinosaurs out of the box, and take a look at them. So there we go, we now have each and every figure out of the packaging, standing here among us, and unfortunately, one thing that you can see the Kid Galaxy figures are kind of plagued by are screw holes, so that's something that I feel like Kid Galaxy should concentrate on working on for the future, and potentially releasing figures that do not have screw holes, sort of fixing that very, very large downside. Like, I get that they're made for kids, but the fact that there are screw holes really takes away a pretty large collector's market, I would imagine, and really turns away a lot of collectors, which in turn is also causing Kid Galaxy to lose sales, because they do create some pretty cool looking figures, and they also create some really interesting species, but the screw holes on the figures often turn people away from them straight away. So something that if Kid Galaxy happens to watch this review, that they should probably concentrate on working on. That, and also not releasing bootlegs in their sets, because just original sculpts, I feel like, would definitely give them a lot more credibility and turn more people onto them. But the figures that we have here, I think, look pretty cool overall, aside from the bootlegs. I actually really quite like the Giganotosaurus back there, even though, again, none of these figures are actually accurate to what the species would look like in real life, but they do look pretty fun regardless, so let's go ahead, get a closer look at them right now. So the very first one that we have is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, detail-wise, we're really not going to look at this figure. The figure in general, we're really not going to look at for the most part, because, again, it is a bootleg, and we try not to support bootlegs as much as possible, even though in situations like this, at least the figure is long retired, and it's not causing Hasbro to lose any money. Like, that is one of the biggest problems with modern bootlegs, is because you're still costing the company that originally created the figures money, because they still sell their figures, and the bootleggers are taking money straight out of the pockets of the companies that produce them and deserve all of the money in the first place. But with this, again, this figure has been long retired for years. It's still not okay, but it's not as bad, I would say, as what a lot of other companies do currently. But the figure as a whole actually sports a pretty fun paint scheme. I actually do quite like the paint scheme that's on this, but I just wish it wasn't a JP3 bootleg. But they have added actually some pretty fun tones, and they've given it a very different appearance as far as the paint scheme compared to the original Hasbro version, and you can also see even the battle damage area is still visible, even though they've just kind of ignored it and then repainted over it. And the jaw does articulate, not well, but it does. The teeth are painted in there. The tongue is also painted. The kind of skin flaps here on the side of the mouth, they all have kind of a realistic appearance, and they actually sport a little bit of a gloss coat to them. But unfortunately, we don't have any nail paint on this figure, which is definitely a downside if you ask me. But in general, the fact that it's a bootleg straight away is quite a bit of a downside. And then this one, which is labeled as a Deinonychus, we have already had this one in numerous videos so far as the bootlegs from Kid Galaxy go. This one's been in quite a few different packs, so we really don't need to look at this one. I never really noticed how far out the throat goes. Like, that doesn't match up anywhere on the figure that I can find a spot for it. It just really doesn't. It's just really not adding up with the rest of the figure. I don't know why. But again, being a JP3 bootleg, we're not going to look at this one either because it's a bootleg. If you want the figure, if you want this one, you know, I would search out the original JP3 version. It's much nicer paint-wise and overall quality-wise. If you can't seem to find that, you can always resort to this set to get a hold of one, but it's not really that great of a figure to begin with. And then there's also the Protoceratops, which we have reviewed before, so we don't need to actually look at this one again. This would be the second time this figure has appeared on my channel in a review, as Kid Galaxy does sometimes loop their figures in different sets. This one specifically is exactly the one that we've looked at because it had the same paint scheme and everything. So there's not even any type of new paint application to the figure, so something we really don't need to look at here in this review. However, there are 3 figures in this set that we have not taken a look at prior on the channel, and that would be the Pachycephalosaurus here would be one. And you can see up here on the head sculpt, it really has quite the highly detailed head sculpt. Like, there's a lot going on detail-wise up here on the head. And you also have some really nice paint with kind of a yellowish-orange color for the primary body color, and then some really cool blues that pop up and kind of leak all over the face right there. You also have a darker brown for the beak area, which does sport a bit of a gloss coat. And then you have a green that appears up here, kind of runs around all of the bumps here on the Pachycephalosaurus head, and then a gray for the dome skull, which has also been given a gloss coat. And then if you look inside the mouth, the inside of the mouth as well is actually painted. There is definitely a little sloppiness, as I could see some of the darker color from the beak has kind of run onto the tongue, but that's not the end of the world. You can also see the eyes are painted with a green and given a black pupil, so there is some pretty decent paint work here on the figure. Now this side's pretty darn sloppy as far as that eye paint goes, so this side definitely isn't very good or precise as far as that paint application, but this side looks okay, I guess. We also have some articulation to the Pachycephalosaurus, as you can turn the head. You can also rotate the arms, the legs, and the tail is on a swivel, but only way out here halfway through the tail. So to articulate the tail, we're just going to snap the poor thing in half and snap the spine in half and then move it. But regardless, it does articulate right there if you really want to turn it in that spot. But as we move down into the body, again, you can see some really nice detailing as far as like the skin texture, and overall just the structure of the body is nicely displayed throughout the sculpt. You have some very nice looking texturing to the skin as we move out the length of the arm. You have some scoots down the hands with, I will say that the hands look a tad ridiculous because it's like a generic like 5-fingered hand, and they just didn't create the fingers in the correct like sizes and stuff. They would be, you know, not all one uniform size on the actual dinosaur. It just looks kind of silly. As we move back up into the body, you can again continue to see how this coloration works. It's just basically the yellowish orangish type of a color, and then the blue, and the blue just kind of designs all over the figure. I will say that they have included quite a bit of that blue though, so it gives the figure quite the striking appearance. It would have been nice if they had included a little more coloration, like maybe some color on the underside of the dinosaur or something, but they have not. You can even see the undersides of the feet are actually quite nicely detailed, as is the underside of the dinosaur in general. You can also see some nice muscle tone associated with the legs here, even a little bit in the calf region. The foot sculpt also looks pretty nice. Some nice scoots down the toes. No nail paint yet again on the feet, unfortunately. And then you lead out the length of the tail, which does have a very sharp curve. The blue turns into a striping effect as opposed to just kind of littering the entire back. So we then have like stripes out here on the tail and a pretty strong curve overall. And then on the opposing side, we do unfortunately have lots and lots of screw holes on the figure, which definitely take away the appeal factor on this side, but the appeal factor was already taken away when they had sloppily painted the eye, so this side isn't that big of a loss, and if I were to display it, I would display it from this side because it looks much nicer over here. But again, the detailing aspect, the paint aspect, everything looks pretty much the same on these figures on both sides, especially considering the figure is almost in a neutral position when it comes to the body here, the torso, and the arms and legs and stuff. The tail is different, the head is, sort of leaning a little bit, I guess you could say, to the right, kind of, but for the most part, it's still a pretty fun Pachycephalosaurus, but definitely not the best one out there. Then we have our Giganotosaurus, which, again, I don't need to keep telling you guys, but these figures are definitely not accurate. They're not ever going to probably be accurate. Who knows, maybe they'll surprise us in the future, but I've never seen a Kid Galaxy figure that I would consider accurate. But as far as this kind of exaggerated Giganotosaurus goes, you can see that it sports some pretty decent detailing here to the face area of the Giganotosaurus. You can also see the nostrils are sculpted out up there. Primarily we have a green coloration for the face. You have some gray that runs up along the top of the head here. You also have a reddish coloration around the eye, and the eyes themselves are red with a black pupil. It looks honestly okay. I actually wouldn't have expected that to look as nice as it does, but it does look pretty decent. You can also see that the teeth are painted, and each tooth appears to be, they're not totally sculpted individually, but they don't appear to be kind of bunched together, so they look alright. The tongue is really, really thick. That is very strange looking. Like, that is just a super thick tongue. It's actually painted pretty nicely, though, and does sport a gloss coat as well, but it definitely looks super, super large. And the jaw articulates actually really well. Like, you can open it pretty darn wide, and you can pretty much open it to any length that you would like, and it moves nicely. Unfortunately, we don't have any type of head articulation like we did have on the Pachycephalosaurus, and actually quite a few of the others, I believe. But if you look over here at this side, this is, of course, in my opinion, the more appealing side because we don't have the screw holes over here, so it definitely looks a lot nicer over here. But the paint and detailing aspect looks pretty much just the same as it did on the previous side. The lower jaw definitely has some very washed out detail to it, and the green here on the face for some reason has a very glossy appearance, which I also don't really like very much. But I will say that the actual painting here, especially of the gray, is really precise, so it does look quite nice. And you can also see that there are ridges and osteoderms that run along the back of the dinosaur, and each of them are painted individually, and they're actually all really, really nicely painted. Like, you could see how precise and perfectly applied that paint application is for those areas, so that is pretty impressive paintwork right there as far as this figure goes. As you move down into the neck region, you can see lots of skin wrinkles, lots of skin creasing going on in the Giganotosaurus, but again, the texturing is like, I don't know if I would say it's washed out down here, but it's very fine. But up here, it's definitely washed out. But down here in the body, it's just more so of like a really fine texturing. Like, you don't see any type of significant scale detail or anything. Like, I could see a few sort of popping up here and there, but it's not anything that's drastically detailed, I would say. You can pick up on the rib cage sort of here in the stomach region. Moving down here into the arms, you can see the arms are a slightly different shade of color compared to the body, but I think they're meant to be the same color, so I don't know if that was just an error on their part, or if that's meant to be that way, or maybe it's just the way that the paint kind of lays on that material. I don't really know, but you can see it is a slightly different shade. It's more of like a yellow in the stomach region, more of like a light brown out here on the arms. The texturing here of the skin on the arms I'm not super impressed with, but it doesn't look terrible either. You can see some nice muscle tone included within the arms. You can see also out here under the hands it transitions to a darker brown, and then the nails are just the same color as that brown, and it has a very glossy look, which yet again I'm not a big fan of. And then coming back up into the stomach region again, there's not really too much going on in the stomach region. Like, you don't see skin wrinkles or anything, but it is, again, okay looking. It has some very fine texturing to the body overall. You see lots of creasing going on here in the hip region, though, and then in the thigh and calf as we move down. We can see some decent muscle tone, the kneecap as well, and then it transitions again to a darker brown here on the feet with some nice scoots down the toes. I'm going to try not to take too super long in each figure because we do, again, have 3 of them to get through. You can also see the dew claws are present, but as we move back up here into the body, you can see some more of those osteoderms pick up, and again, they're really nicely painted, actually, quite shockingly nicely painted. As far as articulation, I didn't mention we do have articulation in the arms and legs as well, and it moves really nicely, really smoothly, but we also have articulation, again, just like the Pachycephalosaurus, kind of like mid-tail, which is just the strangest place to have that articulation. But as you move out the length of the tail, you can see it's a very sharp curve. The tail obviously isn't as long as it should be on the figure overall. It's definitely got a shorter tail, but the actual paintwork, again, looks pretty decent until we get to right here, and then they just stop caring. I didn't realize that before. The very nice ridge line that was really beautifully painted, which I was kind of praising, just stops dead and transitions to a green, and they were just like, we don't care anymore. We're not going to paint the rest of that. On the opposing side, again, just like the Pachycephalosaurus, it looks pretty much the same as what we had just seen on the previous side. The paint application actually looks pretty smooth for the most part as far as like the transition between the green to the yellowish coloration, but the darker brown on the feet and hands I'm not a huge fan of, especially considering how glossy it looks. And then this side, of course, does sport some very ugly screw holes, which is unfortunate because this side seems like the superior side as far as the pose goes, because the tail's turning in this position, the head's kind of leaning in this direction. So posing the figure or displaying the figure from this side isn't as appealing because it's looking away. And unfortunately, this side is the side with the screw holes, but still a pretty cool looking Giganotosaurus figure. And then the final one, and again, there's nothing accurate about this figure at all, and we're just going to go ahead and get that straight out of the way, so I don't need to mention all of the inaccuracies to the figure. But as far as the head sculpt goes, you can see that there's some decent detailing up here on the face. You can see the crest up there on the top of the head is sculpted out. I don't actually see, there's the nostrils. I didn't even notice the nostrils at first. I almost didn't see those, but they are there. The eye socket area looks a little strange, but the eyes are painted with a yellow, given a black pupil, and they do have a bit of a gloss coat to them, so they shine fairly realistically. We do have articulation in the mouth, and then you can see the inside of the mouth has like the bare minimum as far as paintwork goes. We have only the tongue and then the skin flaps here on the side of the mouth that are painted. Don't think the teeth are actually painted. No, definitely not, which is, again, a bit of a downside, but at least it does have a bit of a gloss coat in there, so it has a little bit of a realistic look. As we move down the length of the body, you start to see like some blue stripes, and then you have like a darker green up here on the top that runs along the back of the dinosaur, as well as a lighter green down here, and then those very dark blue kind of stripes and stuff pretty much litter the entire figure. As far as the actual texturing and stuff to the skin goes, it looks okay. It's not incredible by any means, and the paintwork itself is not really that great. It definitely looks more like paint on a figure as opposed to natural body color. But at the same time, it also doesn't look terrible. There are definitely some worse paint jobs in this set. You can see some nice scoots down the fingers, and the nails are actually painted on the hands and the feet, so that is a huge plus, although I can see it's some sloppy paint down here, but so that is a huge plus, honestly. It definitely adds to the overall appeal factor of any figure once you add nail paint. But you can, again, see that the detailing here in the stomach region looks okay. You also have that sail-like area up here on the back, which sports some pretty decent detailing to it. Fairly natural tones of color, I would say, for something like this. Just the actual application isn't all that tremendous. And then you can see some more muscle tone and everything back here in the leg. The kneecap is present on this one as well. I actually really love the scale detail that you see here on the lower part of the foot. That looks really nice. Nice scoots down the toes. Again, the nails are painted with a bit of a glossy brown, so it does have a bit of a realistic look as far as the gloss coat goes, but you can see that there's some very sloppy paint added in certain areas. Even the dew claws, however, did catch paint, which is nice to see. And then coming back up here into the tail, the texturing and everything back here has a lot of creasing. It actually looks pretty nice back here. Of course, we again have articulation in like the most random spot, mid-tail. We also have articulation in the legs, and then in the arms, we have articulation in the neck in this one, and the jaw, so there is quite a bit going on articulation-wise on this one. Unfortunately, we once again come to this side, we have the screw holes that are littering the figure, making this side look a bit more ugly than the previous side, but at least this one is leaning in the direction slightly more so of the side that does have the more appealing aspect to it with the lack of screw holes. But again, this side, you don't see too much difference, honestly, going on that you're really going to take note to. More so over the opposing side, you have, again, some decent detailing here on the underside to the figure. Some nice detailing to the underside of the feet as well. Some nice creases here in the chest region and stuff. And the eye is painted pretty nicely over here, but you can see a little bit of sloppiness to it. But it's a pretty fun figure, and the fact that it's an Ichthyovinator is a pretty darn awesome addition to this set, because it's, again, a species that doesn't get figures very often. Another appealing aspect to the figures is a lot of them actually stand and balance really well. You can see that one definitely does. The Pachycephalosaurus does balance, but it at times can be a little hard to get him to balance. Oh, see, there we go. We just have to get the feet positioned correctly, and he stands pretty well. The only one that I really had problems with would be the Giganotosaurus and the Deinonychus, in quotation marks, because the Deinonychus just has those horribly bowed type of legs, so he doesn't stand very well. And the Giganotosaurus just does not want to do it either. I don't know why. He does not have any intentions of standing for me. He feels very top heavy. As soon as I try to position him in more of an upright position to sort of even the distribution of the weight out, it doesn't work. But you can also see there's a lot more going on up here than there is back here. This is why we need tails that are longer on our dinosaurs to help it balance. But the Giganotosaurus definitely does not seem to want to balance for me. He falls right back down in that position. But all of the others, honestly, do balance. But we've already, again, either taken a look at those figures previously, or they're just bootlegs that we don't care so much about. Now, as far as the size goes, I'm not going to measure each and every one of them. They're all pretty decently sized, though. You can see that from the tape measure here being included. You can definitely see that, again, lengthwise, they sport some pretty decent size, and height-wise as well, especially with the Giganotosaurus up in that position. He definitely has a little bit of a higher appearance to him. And to give you a better idea of the size, we'll go straight to a size comparison. So there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our 6-pack of Kid Galaxy figures, and you could probably tell in comparison to the figures that are included here that these guys do sport a pretty decent size. But if you happen to have any of the Kid Galaxy sets prior to this that have some of these articulated figures like this, they're all usually right in the same similar size range, so you'll probably already have a good idea of the size. But if you don't, then hopefully these figures here in comparison will help you out. So this Kid Galaxy 6-pack is definitely a fun set, but it's not anything that I would say is over-the-top amazing. It has some pretty fun species with ones like the Giganotosaurus and the Ichthyovinator, but there's not anything amazing in here that I would say that qualifies as an incredible must-have figure. They're fun for sure, but they're not anything that I feel like you need to absolutely run out right now and find and own in your collection. But again, Kid Galaxy does provide us with some pretty fun figures from time to time, and every once in a while they include a really obscure species like the Ichthyovinator that we have in this set. The T-Rex that we do have in here, unfortunately, is again a bootleg, but it's a pretty appealing looking bootleg, honestly. As far as the actual paint application goes, I feel like it's easily the best version that Kid Galaxy has released of this Tyrannosaurus so far, but the fact that it is a JP3 Hasbro bootleg is instantly a pretty big downside. The Deinonychus, in quotation marks, is also not a very good figure, and they didn't even bother changing the paint application on this one. This is exactly the same figure that they've released numerous times already. They always seem to release this figure in this paint scheme. I don't know, they just really like that paint scheme, I guess. But the fact that, again, it's a Hasbro JP3 bootleg is also a huge downside for that figure. The Protoceratops we have taken a look at before, and I'm always happy to add another Protoceratops into my collection, even if I already do have one of these. But it's not the best Protoceratops out there, and in fact, it's not even remotely close to being a good Protoceratops. It is kind of like a decent-looking, random, off-the-wall Ceratopsian, but it's definitely not a good Protoceratops. There's a lot wrong with it in every aspect, but there's a lot wrong with almost every one of these figures. But sculpt-wise, it does look decent, though. It does have some decent detail, just not a Protoceratops. The Giganotosaurus as well looks pretty fun, has some decent paint application to him, and a pretty fun sculpt overall. Not the best detailing in certain areas. It's a little washed out, but it also doesn't look terrible overall. The Pachycephalosaurus, in my opinion, is easily one of the most appealing figures in here, because it just has a really cool looking paint scheme to it, a lot of paint application to it as well, and a pretty fun, quite highly detailed sculpt. And then we have the Ichthyovinator, which is probably my favorite out of all just because it is an Ichthyovinator, but it's not the best version of that species, of course, that is on the market. That would probably go to Collect Day currently. I'm hoping someone else takes a shot at that species at some point soon, because even the Collect Day version isn't that great, but it's definitely much nicer than this one that we have here. But the fact that it is an Ichthyovinator is really exciting, and it overall isn't a horrible figure either. It looks pretty fun, has some decent detail, and some okay paint application. All of the figures have decent paint apps, but they're not great. Unfortunately, all of the figures are also littered with screw holes, so that is quite the huge downside if you ask me. But that's pretty much to be expected at this point from a Kid Galaxy articulated figure. If you are familiar with the Kid Galaxy line, you'll already know what you're getting into as far as overall quality and the screw hole issue. But the set is pretty fun. It's not, a must-have, but if you happen to encounter it, it's worth a pickup just to get a few of these figures that are included in here. Unfortunately, the Kid Galaxy sets are a bit hard to find at times, so I will do my best to try to link you guys to this set somewhere. I purchased mine off of Mercari, so it was like a random seller that only had one, so I don't know how available they are online, but I will try to find someone selling this set so you can pick it up as well. Otherwise, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.